Okay, and I think we're live. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. For those new here, my name's Nikki, and in this series we're discussing language learning, and in particular at the moment I'm going through one per month of each of the foreign languages I've been learning, and talking about how and why I got started in them and what I could do to continue my studies. So we're on my second language today. We started with German last week, and today we're talking about French. So, first of all, how I got started. French is the second language that was taught at my high school, at my grammar school back in England. And I started with German in year 7, which is the first year of grammar school or high school in England. And in year 8, we picked up the second foreign language, which in my case, having started with German, was French. So I then took French all the way through to A-levels. And I also then went on and took it in university, which I'll talk about in a minute. But at school, obviously, we were following the study plan. It's so long ago now, it makes me feel old, that I don't remember if we had a particular textbook or anything that we were working from. But I'm sure we didn't actually. I think it was just lesson material prepared by the teacher, and that we just had handouts, because if there'd been a book, I think I would still own it. I don't think I would have gotten rid of it. So the fact I don't have one, I think, means we mostly learnt from handouts, even if she was following book material. So the only book actually I do have from two actually, I still have from my high school French days and university French days. It's a bit heavy, one second. So this is just one volume of the Harrap French dictionary. This is the English to French. Yes, English to French, volume 1. I also have volume 2, which is French to English. This is actually the largest dictionary I own, because for all my other foreign languages, I just have a single volume that's half one language to English, half English to the language. But this one's actually split into 2 full volumes for each way. It's an excellent dictionary, actually. If you're looking for a French dictionary, and this one is still available, because this is going back quite a few years, as I mentioned. But if this Harrap one is still available, it is a really worthwhile investment. It's a very good dictionary. So I've had that since school times, and the other book I've had since school times is this one, which is Collins Gem French Verb Tables. So this is actually a really handy little book. I'll just open a page, show you. So I don't know how well the camera will focus on it, but I find it useful just because even now, like after all these years, occasionally I'll be writing something in French and I'll just have like a complete brain freeze over a verb conjugation. And it's so easy and quick just to grab this little book. Even if the verb itself is not written out in full, at the back there's an index of other verbs, and that tells you which one is the pattern it follows. So it's so quick and easy. If you've just got this little brain freeze and can't quite remember the conjugation, it's such a great quick little look up. So I did French all through high school, and I enjoyed French. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it more than German, less than German. I liked them both. And when it came to choosing A-levels, at first I was going to do, as I mentioned in my last stream, both French and German at A-level, along with music and English, and do 4 A-levels. But then we were given the option of studying for like a condensed 1-year Italian GCSE. But to do that, I could only take 4 A-levels. So I ended up dropping German and keeping French. And to be honest, I think the only reason for that was the fact that I thought it went better with Italian. There was no other reason that I particularly chose to continue French over German, but that was probably the only thing that I really had in my mind, that they kind of were a nice fit together if I was going to take up Italian too. So that was the only reason that I continued French over German. When I went to university, I initially signed up to do a French and English and French degree. So it was 50-50 split English and French. However, I discovered once I started the course for the first semester that the French component was really only 25% French in terms of the French language. And for the other 25%, you were forced to do this kind of European politics class. And I did it for the first semester, and there were a few interesting bits. For example, we talked about minority languages in one video, looking at the different French dialects and things, and that was interesting. But we also had this incredibly dull book that was our set text on the European Union. And that was the way the class was really progressing into discussing European politics, which didn't particularly hold any interest for me. I was only interested in the language. So after speaking to some of my teachers, I was able to swap, and I adjusted the name of the degree to English with French and took 75% English literature and 25% French, which was then just the French class. French at university, though, was a little bit, I almost want to say a disappointment. I mean, it's interesting that I can remember a fair bit from my English degree. I remember what books we studied and things like that, but I remember pretty much nothing from my university French, except that the book we used, the textbook, was called Reprise, because I still own it. Because for me, it felt just like revision. I just felt I did 3 years of revision of the grammar and everything I'd already learned at high school. I don't feel I really progressed in my French and increased my level or anything really during university days. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, perhaps, but at least it kept it ticking over. And so then I left university, and at that point, we might as well swap to thinking about continuing studies. So let me just get a drink. It's 8:30 in the morning here. This is my first drink of the day, so my throat's a bit dry. So once I left university, I did want to continue my French, obviously. So I had a couple of French Penpals at that point, and these days I still have a couple. So I do a little bit of reading and writing in French, from letters to them. In fact, interestingly enough, one of them recently had twin girls. She's slightly older pregnancy, and she's already got several, 2, 3 boys at different ages, up to sort of high school and junior school. And that was quite interesting for me, because there was a lot of terminology she mentioned in her letters about, the babies coming early and different aspects of the delivery. So there was all sorts of vocab I hadn't come across before. So that's quite fun, because the thing I find with letters sometimes is they're great and it's wonderful to practice writing and reading, but you do often end up saying very similar things in each letter. So to have a sort of event like that happen, and I was like, what does this mean? And I had to look up a few sort of medical terms and things that I hadn't come across before. So that was really great fun. Though with COVID at the moment, blocking all the mail a bit, there was a period when France just blocked postage to Australia completely. So my pen pals had to hold back their letters until they released and said you can send them again. And then the speed's obviously double what it used to be. So letters are few and far between at the moment. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. It'll come on a moment in the middle of a sentence, probably. Okay. So yes, I do still write to my pen pals. I enjoy French cinema, so I do watch some French cinema. I have to say, when I first left university, or during university, and the years following when I left, I watched a lot more than I do now. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I went out actively searching for a lot back then, whereas these days I've been watching K-drama a fair bit. So, but I am trying. I found a French series that looks interesting on Netflix, so I do want to watch that soon. In terms of French music, French movies, there's a huge amount out there, and I really enjoy French cinema. I kind of like the more controversial end of French cinema, I guess you'd say. The sort of 18-rated pieces, I find them quite interesting, and I always feel they have fascinating plot lines and some interesting stuff to say. They usually get the rating for violence or nudity, but that kind of stuff doesn't bother me, so I enjoy watching those. I haven't really got into full-on comedies as much, but I really love French rom-coms as well, because I think, unlike the sort of English and American rom-coms, they have a lot of heart, and they're not quite as contrived at times, I think, is probably the best way to say it. Amélie, if you're sort of new to French cinema and you want something that's light on the outside but has a little bit of emotional depth as well, Amélie is a great one to start with. So, but really, films and things are going to come down to everyone's personal taste, so I'm not going to recommend a whole ton of films. But the other thing I really have always loved doing with French is listening to music, in particular musicals. I've mentioned musicals in my German stream as well, and that definitely holds true in French, because I'm a huge musical theatre fan. So some French musicals that you might want to have a look at if you like musicals, you like learning through music. You'll probably find these around on YouTube, at least clips, if not the full shows. Notre de Paris, based on the Hunchback of Notre Dame story, is really great. There's a French musical of Romeo and Juliette, which is also awesome. Dracula, Entre l'amour et la mort. So Entre l'amour et la mort is, it's kind of the Dracula story, but it's updated into sort of a modern age. It has a very rock feel to the music. And it stars one of the actors, or one of the singers, who's also in Notre Dame de Paris. He's got a wonderful voice playing Dracula, so do check that one out. And in fact, in French musicals, a lot of their musicals are rock opera or pop opera style pieces, the original shows. And that's going all the way back to Starmania from the 70s. And I still love Starmania. It's a real 70s rock opera style piece. But it's still really got a fascinating story that resonates even now, I think. So that one's worth checking out as well. But do get the French language version. There is an English language version that floats around. It's an official translation, but it's awful. It's really bad. The songs are just like massacred in English. So do check out the French version of it if you want to check it out. The storyline is basically looking at the idea of stardom, but also there's this sort of central theme of a politician who's trying to he's a businessman who wants to get into politics, become the president, and is using some slightly underhand means to get into power. So it's worth having a look at anyway. Which has completely ruined my train of thought. Oh yes, singers. So the French musicals are usually performed by French pop singers, or often performed by French or French Canadian pop singers. So I have gone on and listened to some of their pop music afterwards if I've liked their performances as well. But I'm not a huge pop music fan overall, so I tend to stick more to musicals. So singing along to French musicals is something that I still do. Again, not as much, because I've been tending to sing more in Japanese and Korean lately, but I definitely still do sing as well. And then, of course, there's reading. And reading, because I'm a huge reader as well, I started reading in French fairly early on in my French studies, certainly by university. I think I was even reading in French late high school. And to pick up books in French depends where you are in the world. But for me at that time, it was reasonably easy because I was still in the UK, and Foyles in London had an awesome foreign language book section. It used to be a separate store, but then it kind of amalgamated with Foyles, and it's still there, I believe. So if you're in the UK and London, Foyles is the place to go for foreign language. Over here, I'm in Australia, it's a little bit harder. We do have some foreign language bookstores, but not in Adelaide where I live. And you can get some, though, from like Book Depository and ordering online. But I haven't really bought new French language books for a while. Most of the ones on my shelves are ones I've had since the UK. I tended to read a lot of classics. Victor Hugo in particular I'm very fond of, but also stuff from the sort of French Revolution period and just pre. So I've read a lot of Rousseau in French as well. Also books about the French Revolution. I'm hugely interested in the French Revolution and Robespierre, so I did a lot of reading in it, and that included buying books in French. I have like the complete works of Robespierre in French. And then since then I bought a few more modern books as well. just to practice reading in a more sort of modern style of language as well. But in some ways, the classics are a good place to start in French, because although you'll find some archaic expressions, often if you're familiar with the classic in its English translation, that does help as you're reading it in French, because you know roughly what to expect, and you can kind of follow the story even if you're not picking up all the words. So that's a recommendation. The Livre de Poche series are really good, not too expensive as well for French classics. So there's a few recommendations and things as well. So perhaps I'll just talk now. One more recommendation I'll give you actually before we move on is a book that I bought post-studies just for myself as I continued my French on my own. And that one is this one, Modern French Grammar, A Practical Guide by Lang and Perez. And it's a Routledge book again. Now, I think I mentioned Routledge in my German video. They do put out very good language study books. They're also very expensive, but I think you kind of weigh up how many resources you need. Rather than buying lots of cheaper ones, is it better just to go for one expensive one? These are fairly pricey, but they're really well written. These are not fun, exciting books you'll love to work through. This is a very, I want to say dense grammar guide, but that perhaps puts the wrong spin on it. It's a very easy to understand grammar guide, but it is just a grammar guide. There's no fun mixed in the pages. Okay, it's just grammar explanations, but they're very well written, well presented grammar explanations. So, and that's pretty much true across the Routledge line of language books. So if you see a Routledge edition and it's a bit more than another edition, for me personally, I'd probably always spend that bit more and go the Routledge, but obviously it depends on your own particular needs. But this is a book that I do like. I haven't had to reference it a huge amount, but I do now and then. If there's something that I want to say that's a little bit more complicated, that's not coming straight to mind, then I will have a look in this book. So I think moving on from there, I'll just talk a little bit about what I'm doing these days for French to finish. So when I was still in England and after I'd finished all my studies, I did still go to Paris a bit. I mean, not every week or anything, but obviously living in the UK, I had fairly quick access to Paris via the tunnel or flight. I tended to go via the tunnel just because you end up right in central Paris. You don't have to mess around with your baggage and things. It's nice and easy. But that was something I like to do. At least once a year, I'd go to Paris for a long weekend, and you could practice your speaking, even if it was just to the hotel concierge or to people in restaurants. You know, you could still have a go at speaking French and hear French around you. Since moving to Australia, I haven't been to France at all. That's mostly due to lack of time and resources. It takes a long time to get to France from Australia. And although I've been back to Europe a handful of times since moving here, I've always spent part of that time with my family in England. And then we have gone off, my husband and I went to Prague one time. We did Scandinavia on another trip. So that's not to say we will never do France, but it hasn't happened yet. So my ability to speak French has really deteriorated, I feel. I still understand as well as I used to in terms of listening and reading. Writing is plodding along. I know that I still make errors now and again, and I do want to practice the writing a bit more. But for me, one of the principal things I need to work on is my speaking, because I haven't spoken French properly for years. And I do feel that I would probably panic and not be able to say much just because I was worried that I wasn't recalling all the vocabulary fast enough. Whereas at least, you know, when you're writing, you've got time to stop for a second and think, oh, yes, I know what that word is. But at the moment, continuing my French, I hardly did it at all, really, for a few years, the last few years. I would watch and read the occasional bit, and I was obviously writing to my Penpals, but that was it. I wasn't doing any serious study. So as with all my European foreign languages in the last 6 months or so, I've been trying to really pick them up again and work on them and see what level I'm at, where I need to improve. I know speaking is going to be a big thing for the French, so I'm definitely considering whether there's something I can do on italki, maybe have a conversation every couple of months or so to just to practice that aspect and get a bit more confidence back in it. In the meantime, I've been following a few YouTube channels. The ones that I like for myself for my study are Francaise Authentique, Learn French with Alexa, Language City, and Learn French with Elsa. All these channels are in the description below. And I like these because they do a mix of listening at a sort of intermediate to advanced level. And they do grammar and vocab and things that kind of covers a range. Some of it's more beginner than I don't necessarily need to watch those videos, but then they'll put something out that's a bit more interesting, maybe comparing synonym type verbs and things like that, which I will watch whenever those kind of videos come out. I try and do some French listening as well, even if I'm not watching movies and that or playing music. I like to listen to some different content. Here in Australia, we have SBS, which is one of our TV channels that shows quite a large amount of foreign language content. And we have SBS On Demand and SBS Online Radio. So for French, there's often content on there, French news and other kind of podcast type things. One that I particularly enjoy is France Culture, which is a website where there's various podcasts and articles about culture in a very broad sense. It mixes anything from literature to science. There's a little bit of everything, and I really enjoy their content. In fact, I've just discovered they've put up a series of a radio drama for a French version of Wuthering Heights. So I think that's something I might listen to over the next few weeks. I think there's 10 parts, so maybe I'll do one a week or something and listen to that, because that would be quite interesting, I think, because I do love Wuthering Heights, but I've never read or heard it in French. So I think that's going to be one I'll look forward to watching. And of course, French news channels like France 2 and others. There's plenty out there where you can watch news programs and things like that. So I try and do a little bit of that. Actually, I often do for French, German, and even Italian as well, where I'm a bit more advanced with the languages. I often have those podcasts and things playing in the background while I do a bit of work on ancestry, on my family tree and things like that, where I can sort of concentrate enough that I'm following the podcast, but also do a few things at the same time. I also like a podcast called Inner French I found recently. That one's quite fun as well. So I think that's pretty all for recommendations at the moment. And as I said, right, I'm trying to do some French every week. At the moment, I've been predominantly doing listening, but I want to try and get into some more reading and writing. I did write a little intro piece for Journaly blog post the other day, and I will write more in the future. With Journaly, at the moment, I'm doing one post a week and I'm rotating through my languages. I may try to up that to 2 posts a week, but I thought I'll do all the introductory ones for each language first and then see how I feel from there. And it depends what time I've got as well, how much work I've got on. But I'll do at least one a week, which means I'll write each language at least once every 2 months. And if I can up it to 2 a week, I'll be able to write one every month. So we'll see how I go. And as I said, I'd also like to really work hard on my speaking side of things again this year, because I feel that that's lacking a little bit these days. But I think if I just got into doing it again, that I would pick it up again fairly quickly, because I have got quite a few years of French study behind me. So I feel like my accent's really atrocious at the moment. It was getting better, and then obviously stopping speaking for so long, it's probably really bad. So that will need some work. But I do love French. I love the sound of French. And there's something just flowing and beautiful about the language itself. I'm always fascinated by the Romance languages and the way they link to each other and the connections between them and things as well. And obviously French has influenced English a fair bit over the years too. So what do I dislike about French though? I guess the thing I dislike about French sometimes is the fact that it's not always pronounced the way it's spelled. We all love a good phonetic language where once you've learned how to pronounce the words, you can just fly. Whereas with French, some of the pronunciation sometimes compared to the spelling is a bit of fun. But otherwise, I don't think French is a majorly difficult language. It's not the absolute easiest. I'd probably sit it somewhere in the middle if you're sort of thinking of learning a language. Some of the grammar gets a little bit complicated. And as I just said, also the spelling versus pronunciation side of things as well. But the grammar's not absolutely dreadful like in some languages I will talk about soon. I'm thinking Czech and Icelandic at the moment, but it certainly is not as easy as, say, Danish, which I will also be talking about shortly. But it's a medium level, I'd say, difficulty language. So if you're looking for something that's a slight challenge but not too much of one, then French might be a good language to try, particularly because there are absolutely tons of resources out there for French, and you won't have any trouble finding material for listening, reading, grammar type textbooks, anything like that is going to be very readily available. And there's plenty of movies and TV series and the like as well. And of course, music. So I think I will end there for today. So that was my little roundup of how I started learning French, what I'm doing with French these days. I'll be back again next month when we will be talking, as you might have guessed from things I've mentioned in the last two videos, about Italian, which was the third foreign language I started studying. So I hope you will join me again then, but I'll end there for now. Bye, everyone.